glued our table up, and it is time to make our tabletop. It's going to be the exact same process that we went through for the table bottom. Just the dimensions are going to be a little bit different when we go to put the top together. I do want to take a minute and talk again about how we're going to lay these things out. I've already found some material and I've rough cut it to a little bit longer than what the dimensions are on the plans. And when I put these all together, they're a little bit wider than what is called out on the plan. So I have room, after I glue this whole panel together, I have room to go ahead and mill it and clean it all up. So this is our top. This is the show surface. So we really want to take our time and match and find material that goes well together. So take your time, look each board over, okay, try and find similar grain, you know, if you like, you know, the look of defects and things like that, or knots and things, locate them, put them on there, okay, make it something nice that you want to look at over the next, you know, rest of your life. So once you have it laid out, okay, again, we're going to mark our surfaces. We know that these are going to be our tops, our show surfaces. I'm going to put arrows to the edges that need to be milled, jointed, or ripped on the table saw. Okay, and then the other thing I want to do, so that I don't accidentally do something like this later, when I go to glue up, I'm going to put a couple of lines across this joint, or each joint, so that when I go to put these four boards together, right, they will go back in the exact same fashion. So I can't accidentally put that board that way. Okay, I can tell that the lines are off, and I know that that isn't backwards. So a little helpful hint to make sure that things go back together the way that you intend them to do. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and joint these edges, rip these middle boards to get a clean edge, and I'm going to glue it up, and then we'll mill it down to the size called out on the dimensions, and we'll meet back here at the table and talk about how we're going to put this thing on the actual table. See you in a bit. Top is all done. Okay, now we need to worry about how we're going to fasten it to the table itself. We can't just simply glue it on here, because the way wood expands and contracts, it would just break the glue joint, and your top would fall off. So what we need to do is create what are going to be glue blocks, okay, that we're going to use to screw up into the tabletop. I've got some material that I milled to 3/4 thick by 3/4 wide, and I'm going to go ahead and cut, I don't know, 3 or 4 inch long pieces off here. The length isn't really super important, but what we're going to do is we're going to cut little blocks and stick them and glue them up into the corners here of our table, and then we'll be able to run a screw up through this into our tabletop to hold it in place. So I'm going to go ahead and make 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll make 4 for the end table, probably 6 for the coffee and the sofa table. But I'm just going to cut these. They don't need to be exact again. 3, 3.5 inches. So 3, 6, 9, 12. That should be enough material for us to go ahead and drill holes through so that we can put screws in. So I'm going to run over to the miter saw. I'll cut these 4 blocks off, and we'll talk about how we're going to cut the holes and countersink to accept the screw. I got my blocks. Okay, my glue blocks. Now what we need to do is go ahead and drill a hole through the center of this block and countersink it so that the screw will pass through. So to do this, okay, I've got like a 3/16 inch drill bit loaded up in this drill, and I have what's called a countersink bit loaded up in this drill. So again, the length of these isn't super important, and neither is the location of the hole. We just want to try and be somewhere centered. So I'm going to go ahead and load this up in a vise real quick. And somewhere centered along its width and centered along its length, I want to go ahead and drill a hole through. Okay, and now from here, I want to open the top of this hole. If I put the screw in there right now, you see the screw head sticks up, Okay, we want to avoid that. So what I'm going to do is countersink the top of this hole slightly. And that will provide a place for that screw head now to fit below the surface of my glue block. So I'm going to go ahead and do these other three real quick. Right, so next step for us, okay, is to go ahead and fasten these to the table. And what we're going to do is we're going to glue them up in each corner, but rather than glue them and clamp them, we're going to glue them and use a brad nail gun to hold them in place while the glue dries, as opposed to having a bunch of little clamps hanging off of our project. Plus it's fun to use a nail gun. So let me get the nail gun set up and grab some glue, and I'll show you how to go ahead and attach these things to your table. All right, I got my glue, my nail guns, my block. Okay, we're going to go ahead and attach these now with a little bit of glue and the nail guns. Now there's a couple things to remember when we go to put these in. Right, we want to have obviously the hole running vertically, okay, because the screw is meant to go through the block up into the tabletop. The countersunk side needs to face down, okay, so that the screw head fits inside that countersink going this way. And when we attach them, it's important to attach them so that they do not extend beyond the height of our rail. If they're above the rail, the tabletop is going to sit on top of the blocks as opposed to sit on top of the rail. So what we need to do is make sure that this block is either perfectly aligned with or just the tiniest bit, maybe a 32nd of an inch lower than the height of this rail. Okay, so once you have them oriented correctly, it's time to go ahead and nail them on. The best way to do this, I find, is to go ahead and lay the table down on its side so that you can aim down with the nail gun and you don't have to hold the block in place. So I'm going to put one block in each corner, okay, like this. Right? Again, we don't need a ton of glue to do any of this, so I'm going to take glue and apply a little bit to one of these blocks, just a little bead. I'm going to take the other block, right, and just kind of smear some glue around. Kind of get it a little tacky, make sure I'm all over the entire surface here. That is more than enough glue to hold this all in place. So again, countersink goes toward the bottom, okay, and we go in the corner, and we make sure we are just a little bit below the long rail. Okay, at this point I'm going to take my nail gun, okay, and I'm going to put a nail on either side of this hole going into my long rail. So making sure I don't hit the hole, press down, hold it firmly, pull the trigger. Okay, move over to the other side, press down, hold it firmly, pull the trigger. Okay, and we'll put the second block on over here. Try and keep your fingers out of the way. Flip. All right, So now the blocks are in place. Okay, we're going to be able to put our tabletop on and run 4 screws up through the block and into the tabletop, holding it all nicely in place. So let me get the screw gun, we'll get our top, and we'll get this fastened to our table. All right, we're ready to go ahead and screw the top to our table. Now we obviously want the tabletop to be centered on the frame of the table. So to do this, we're going to actually flip the whole works upside down. So I've got my top right here. Okay, this is the side that I want up on my table. So I'm going to flip this over and put it down on my workbench. And I'm going to take my table, I'm going to flip that upside down on my top. And now it's just a little bit of back and forth trying to get the overhang here to match the overhang on the other side, and the overhang here to match the overhang over there. So I'm just going to take a ruler and eyeball this. It should be somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 inches along the end. And like an inch on each side. So that's inch, a little over 2, a little over 2, a little over 2, 2. And that never happens this fast. So, all right. Now that this is in place, I can go ahead and put these 4 screws through those glue blocks. Now, a word on using the screw gun. Okay, this is not some sort of magical device. Okay, we can't just touch the screw to the end of the drill and make it go in. You have to apply pressure, pushing the drill bit down so that the screw bites and drives through. The other thing you need to keep in mind is that you need to keep the shank of the screw and the driver and the drill all in line with one another for this to work well. If you have the screw off-centered slightly, okay, all you're going to do is tear up the head of this screw. All right. The other thing we need to think about is each of these drills has a clutch on it. Okay, and there's a series of numbers that run around the outside of this collar here. That refers to how much pressure it takes to prevent the drill from spinning. So number 1, it takes very little pressure to keep that drill from spinning. If I go all the way up to the drill setting, you can't stop this from spinning. So if I'm trying to drive a screw, I don't want to force it as far as I possibly can, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to either strip the hole out that I'm trying to screw into, or I'm going to break the screw. So I want to set this somewhere in the 9 to 11 range. Okay? That way, if I get enough torque onto the screw, I'm not going to break the screw, and I'm not going to rip material out of the hole as I screw it in. Okay, we're going to start at 10 and see how it goes. I might have to go up and down from there. Okay, it all depends on the type of wood you're putting your screws into. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place the screw in the hole, line my drill up, okay, making sure I keep everything straight in line. Okay, and I have pressure pushing down on the drill with one hand, and the other hand is working the trigger. Okay, and there that's seated nicely. Now I could tell that's a little bit too high on the clutch, so I'm going to turn it down just a little bit. Okay, we'll put the next one in. There we go. Okay, and then we'll put the other 2. All right, so final reveal here. Okay, we have a table now, finally. Okay, top is attached. I know it seems weird that we only use 4 screws, but that is really all it takes to hold this all together, or hold the top on. Okay, we don't want to overdo it on screws, because as the seasons change, this top is going to expand and contract. Okay, depending on the humidity. And if we have a lot of screws holding it in place, the wood of the top is just going to expand, and it's going to take whatever is attached to it and move it with it. So 4 screws is going to allow it to move a little bit without having any problem. Okay, 4 screws are also going to help to keep this flat over time because it's attached nicely to our frame. So what's next? We're going to go ahead and cover how to go ahead and route the top edge of our table to give it a little bit of decoration and dress it up a little bit so it's not just this sharp corner. So we'll talk how to use a handheld router next and how to do so safely, and then you can kind of dress up your table based on the router bit you pick. So we'll see you soon, and we'll talk about some routers.